It had been a brutal 3-day wildfire drill across the state border, and Preston Walker's body ached like he'd slept on gravel which, for the record, he had 48 hours in flame-retardant gear, 12-hour shifts, 1 busted boot, and more smoke than a casino lounge. Now, back in the quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Creek Estates, all Preston wanted was a cold beer, a hot shower, and his recliner. But as he turned onto Sycamore Trail Drive, his tires skidded, just shy of something that made him slam the brakes and blink twice. A red carpet, not a metaphor, an actual velvet-fibbered, 10-foot-wide, gold-trimmed red carpet, stretched across his entire driveway like it was leading to Buckingham Palace. And at the end of it stood the very last person he wanted to see, Karen Delacroix, vice president of the HOA, self-appointed queen of block parties, garage sales, and apparently Hollywood premieres. With a glittery sash over her shoulder that read HOA royalty, Karen posed like she was about to accept a Grammy. Preston put his truck in park, stepped out, and stared. "Karen, what is this?" She spun on her kitten heels, phone in hand. "My annual HOA Awards Gala. Red carpet entrance? You're parked on my event." He blinked. "This is my driveway." Karen didn't miss a beat. "Temporarily designated as a community welcome zone. Don't be a party pooper, Preston. We're building spirit here." Behind her, a group of overdressed residents giggled, under string lights that stretched from mailbox to mailbox like a dollar store movie set. Champagne flutes, folding chairs, even a valet sign jammed into the bushes. "You're trespassing," Preston said flatly. "I just got back from an emergency wildfire drill. You're on private property." Karen raised a manicured brow. "Sweetie, your driveway is part of the visual unity of the community. It's called festive integration." He stared, stunned. He wasn't just a homeowner, he was a certified county fire marshal inspector, and what Karen had just described wasn't festive. It was a violation waiting to burn. Then he noticed it. A propane heater too close to a fabric tent, paper decorations covering the mailbox, a portable bar blocking clear sidewalk access. And what was that? The fire hydrant near his lawn, boxed in by stacked champagne crates. Karen turned away, to take selfies with arriving guests. Preston quietly pulled out his phone. Photos. Timestamps. Hazard notes. This wasn't just a party. It was a full-scale safety risk, and she had the gall to think her glitter made her untouchable. He stepped back toward his truck, not saying a word. Karen called after him, "If you're not gonna dress up, at least don't be an eyesore. Go park somewhere else, hun." He opened his door and muttered, "Sure, I'll make a call first." And that was the first domino. She didn't know it, but she just triggered a process that couldn't be stopped once it started. He texted a direct number to the county fire office. Attached for photos, blocked, hydrant, unsafe propane heater, obstruction of egress, unauthorized crowding on private access. They responded in under 2 minutes. En route. Etha 45. Karen kept dancing under twinkly lights. Guests clinked glasses. Someone set up a Bluetooth speaker, and Preston just sat in his truck. Arms crossed, eyes on the red carpet laid across his legal property. There's a rule among fire inspectors: document, report, and let the system do its work. Preston never used his badge to flex. But this wasn't about power. It was about consequences. And Karen was about to learn that some parties come with a burn notice. And when the sirens started sounding down the road, getting closer with every blink, Karen still didn't flinch, but she was about to. Karen was midway through her grand toast standing on the velvet runner across Preston's driveway, a gold-tipped microphone in one hand and a glass of rose in the other when the sirens started. At first, the guests clapped. They thought it was part of the show, a surprise entrance, maybe a local celebrity. But then the truck came into view, a full-size fire engine, lights flashing, brakes hissing, stopping squarely at the entrance of the cul-de-sac. The cheering died immediately. 3 uniformed fire officials stepped out. Helmets, clipboards, authority. And the one leading the group, Captain Breen. Preston didn't move from his truck. He watched from the driver's seat, still in his fire gear, arms folded. He knew exactly what was about to happen, and he wasn't going to stop it. Karen, oblivious to the growing unease around her, marched toward the fire crew like she owned the street. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her clipboard like a traffic wand. "This is a private event. You're not on the guest list." Captain Breen didn't even blink. "We received a formal hazard report from a licensed county inspector." "This isn't a request, ma'am. It's a safety enforcement." Karen laughed awkwardly. "Oh, is this about the little heater thing?" "I googled the distance. We're fine. Everyone's fine." One of the other officers walked over to the heater and measured. "Not fine," he said simply. The air turned thick with tension. The guests shuffled nervously, clinking glasses with fake smiles. The jazz quartet quietly packed up their instruments. Karen's voice went sharp. "Look, I have permits. I filed with the HOA and everything. This is a sanctioned neighborhood event." Captain Breen looked down at her clipboard, scanned the top. "This permit number," he said, "is for an unrelated business, a gutter cleaning company in a different county." Karen froze. "Ma'am," Brienne continued, "you've blocked a fire hydrant, laid flammable material across a residential egress, and obstructed emergency vehicle access. I'm shutting this event down. The gasps started from the guests like popcorn kernels bursting. One man spilled his drink. Another stepped aside to quietly call his wife and tell her to come pick him up. A woman in a sequin jacket whispered, "I knew this wasn't legal." Karen was red-faced now. She stormed toward Preston's truck, heels stabbing at his driveway. Carpet like a flamenco dancer gone rogue. You did this? You called them?" Preston calmly stepped out, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. "I filed a report," he said, as required. "When I see safety violations, I don't ignore them even when someone's trying to cosplay as Beyoncé." Karen sputtered. "You're just bitter because you weren't invited." He raised an eyebrow. "To a party on my property, Captain." Brienne stepped in between them. "Ma'am, step back. We're officially issuing a citation for obstruction and hosting an unpermitted event and impersonating a permit," Preston added quietly. Karen spun back. "What? That's not a thing?" "It is," said one of the fire officials, "and it carries a civil fine plus possible HOA board review." Karen's voice dropped into panic. Okay, let's just pause everything. Can't we just talk?" Preston, we're neighbors." Preston didn't flinch. "Neighbors don't roll red carpets over your property and lie to the county." The fire crew began dismantling the space. Guests started filing out, fast-walking to their SUVs and golf carts. The jazz band was gone. Even the valet kid had bailed out. Karen stood alone, gripping her clipboard like a life raft. Across the street, someone in a lawn chair filmed the whole thing on their phone. A few other residents nodded at Preston silently. One gave a thumbs dash up. By the time the red carpet was folded and the lights came down, only Karen remained. Her perfect night had turned to ash. And it was far from over, because as she stormed back toward her house, she didn't notice Preston quietly taking one last photo of the champagne crates, still stacked against the fire hydrant. He sent it straight to the fire marshal's office. Karen thought this was just a party that got interrupted, but Preston had just lit the fuse on a full county investigation, and next time, she'd be under review not just for safety violations, but for fraud. The next morning, Karen's glittery yard signs were still scattered across the cul-de-sac like confetti after a canceled parade. The velvet ropes were gone, the red carpet trickled and grass-stained had been tossed into a crumpled heap behind her trash bins, and the HOA message board, lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had uploaded video of her meltdown. Karen screaming at firefighters, Karen throwing her clipboard, Karen accusing Preston of sabotaging the HOA spirit. The caption under the footage read, "Red Carpet Queen Gets Fire-Marshaled Literally." It had over 2,000 views by noon, and Karen, she was losing her grip. At precisely 3:07 p.m., she marched to Preston's door holding a Tupperware of cookies, and a fixed smile that looked like it had been stapled on. "Hi, Preston. Just wanted to clear the air," she chirped. "You know, neighbor to neighbor." He opened the door slowly, half expecting her to serve a lawsuit with frosting cookies. He said, "From scratch?" she said, thrusting them forward. "Look, yesterday got a little dramatic, but we're both passionate people. We both care about the community." Preston didn't say anything. He just looked at her, silent, unreadable. She lowered her voice. "So, I wanted to talk about the whole permit situation. There was some confusion." Preston leaned on the doorframe. "The one you filed under a business that cleans gutters in another state." Karen's smile twitched. "That's just a issue. My assistant mixed up some numbers." "You don't have an assistant," Preston said flatly. There it was, that flicker of Karen's real face under the mascara mask. "Well, that's not relevant. Look, I've already spoken with the HOA board. I told them this was a simple mix-up, and that you might have misunderstood my intentions." "Misunderstood? Your fake permit? Or your attempt to turn my driveway into your personal Hollywood Boulevard?" he asked. Karen's voice dropped. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "Not when it endangers people," Preston said. She stared at him for a long beat. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she hissed, voice low now. "You want to be the hero? Fine. But I've been on this HOA board for 6 years, and I know how to clean up messes." Preston raised an eyebrow. "By forging documents." Karen flinched. He stepped back and started to close the door. "I already filed a formal report. This is in the county's hands now." But before the door shut, he added, "Oh, and I spoke with the actual permit office this morning. They're launching a fraud investigation. They'll probably want to talk to your assistant." The door closed with a quiet finality. Karen stood frozen on the porch, cookies still in hand. And across the street, a neighbor in gardening gloves just happened to be recording. By the time the video was uploaded to the HOA's community page, it had already been reshared across several local forums captioned, "Karen tries sweet-talking the fire marshal, gets burned again." That night, the real damage hit. The county sent an email to the Willow Creek HOA board, request for HOA event records and permit documentation, potential misrepresentation, suspected that might have been managed. Bliff. Karen hadn't forged multiple signatures on her event approval form, and it didn't help that one of the signatures belonged to Mr. Elridge, a retired Navy engineer who'd been in Palm Springs for 2 months and had an airtight alibi. He'd had hip surgery the same week. Karen claimed he signed. The board called an emergency meeting. Preston didn't even need to speak. Karen showed up in pearls and panic, waving a folder of excuses, trying to blame technical errors in digital autofill, but the signatures didn't match. Not even close. One board member slid a printed side-by-side comparison across the table Karen's claimed form, and a real one from a prior HOA event. Explain the difference in strokes, spacing, and ink, they said. Karen started sweating. That's printer calibration. The room fell dead silent. Preston simply leaned back in his chair and let the committee do what it was designed to do, because what started as a blocked driveway was quickly becoming a criminal review, and Karen, she was now the center of a scandal that could cost her more than her HOA title. By Thursday morning, Karen's fall from grace was the talk of every porch, group text and dogwalk circle in Willow Creek Estates. The gala footage had made its way to a local HOA horror group on Facebook, and someone on Nextdoor titled it, "When HOA Karens Meet Real Authority." Spoiler, they cry. Karen's fake charm had been incinerated, but she wasn't giving up, just changing tactics. That's when Preston noticed it. A bright yellow envelope taped to his mailbox. HOA. Warning. Trash bin visibility. Violation $75. He blinked. The bin was tucked neatly behind his side gate, like it always was. The next morning, another envelope. HOA citation. Mailbox color deviation. Gloss. Finish. Violates earth-tone standards. $100. Preston stood there, squinting at the absurdity. His mailbox had been the same matte black for 7 years. No one had ever said a word. By the end of the week, he'd received 4 separate citations, including excessive blacktop shine on his driveway fence, board misalignment, potential, safety risk, grass blade height variance. Yes, seriously. Each one signed off by K. Delacroix, Vice President, HOA Compliance Division. Karen wasn't even subtle. She was abusing what little power she had left to go full petty dictator on Preston's property. But the part that made him pause wasn't the fines. It was the last line on the 4th citation. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the acting HOA authority within 5 days. She had closed the appeal window before the ink dried. That wasn't petty. That was calculated. But Preston wasn't new to petty tyrants in uniform. He'd been in fire enforcement for over 15 years. He'd handled worse than Karen with FLAMETHROWERS. So instead of blowing up, he got curious. He dusted off the HOA bylaws, the ones Karen had always claimed were too complex for most residents to understand, and flipped straight to the compliance and citation section. There it was, bold and underlined. All HOA board members must recuse themselves from issuing citations if under active investigation or board review. Karen's permit fraud report was still open, which meant she was violating her own governing rules every time she slapped a fine on Preston. He grinned. 2 hours later, he walked into the HOA office with a 3-ring binder, a written statement, and just to spice things up, a flash drive of surveillance. Clips showing the exact moment Karen trespassed onto his property to inspect his trash bins. Karen wasn't expecting it. She strutted into the HOA office later that day for a routine meeting and walked right into a formal complaint hearing. 3 board members were waiting. Preston didn't even need to speak. His binder did the talking. Karen's face went full panic when they brought up her active investigation status and the conflict of interest clause. She tried to backpedal. I was just doing my duty, protecting neighborhood standards. One of the board members held up a citation, glossy black paint, Karen. Another pointed at a blown-up photo of her walking through Preston's side yard with a clipboard at 642A.M. She stammered, That's not even trespassing. Property line footage says otherwise, Preston said calmly. Karen's chair let out a whine as she stood up too fast. You're all just buying into his firefighter fantasy. He's manipulating you. That's when the board president leaned forward. Karen, we've also received a tip that your own yard lighting setup may be wired under the easement line without approval. Karen froze. I don't know what you're talking about. But Preston knew. He'd already pulled the electrical plans from city records. Karen's elaborate yard lights, the ones she used to illuminate her red carpet experience, were powered by illegal underground wiring that cut across a shared easement owned by the city and utility company. The moment she started finding him over mailbox paint, she'd unknowingly lit the fuse on her own personal code bomb. Because now, the county inspectors were coming, and next time they showed up, it wouldn't be with just a clipboard, it would be with citations that couldn't be appealed. By Monday, the neighborhood had taken on a strange silence. Karen's once vibrant lawn, usually blasted with floodlights by sunset, sat in eerie darkness. No twinkle lights, no driveway uplighting, no fake golden solar torches pointing toward her lawn flamingo sculpture, just shadows. And Preston knew why. Because late Friday night, he'd sent one final email to the county utility enforcement office, along with video evidence, GPS coordinates, and a snapshot of a contractor's invoice Karen had accidentally included in an HOA newsletter 2 months prior. The invoice read, trench install for line burial LED units, 50 FT, under flagstone path, and the signature, Karen Delacroix, the problem. The flagstone path was laid directly over a municipal easement that protected the neighborhood's water and electrical grid. No permits, no city approval, no inspections. Preston knew the stakes. Underground electrical lines unpermitted and near gas mains could trigger explosions if disturbed. It wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. It was a public safety hazard. So when the 2 county inspectors arrived in bright yellow jackets and hard hats at 8:03 a.m. Tuesday morning, Preston was already sipping coffee on his porch, watching with quiet satisfaction. They knocked on door. She answered in pajamas, robe flapping, mascara from the day before, smudged like a villain caught mid-meltdown. What now? She groaned, cradling a mug that said Queen Bee of the block. The lead inspector held up a clipboard. Ma'am, we've received evidence of illegal utility modifications on municipal land. We're going to need access to your yard. Karen blinked. No, I haven't done anything like that. That's insane. Preston watched as another inspector walked past the property line and scanned the flagstone with a detection wand. It beeped, then beeped again faster this time. Line confirmed, he called out. Unregistered cable trace under city zone. Karen's face went pale. That's decorative. It's live, ma'am, the inspector said. That's not decoration. She spun toward Preston, who waved politely over his mug. You've got to be kidding me, she yelled, stepping barefoot onto her lawn. This is harassment. The city utility truck pulled up seconds later. A third man stepped out with tools and a folded-up notice under his arm. He didn't speak much, just handed Karen a notice of immediate violation and began marking up her lawn with orange flags. What does this mean? She shrieked. It means you have 48 hours to dig up the unauthorized wiring, or the city will do it and bill you for hazardous abatement, the man said flatly. Plus, a review of all property improvements made under your name within the last 12 months. She choked. You're saying I'll be audited? He nodded. And if anything else is non-compliant, you'll face separate fines. Possibly criminal charges. Karen turned to the inspectors, desperate. This is personal. He's doing this to me. She pointed at Preston, but one of them shook his head. No, ma'am, you did this to yourself. A crowd had started to gather, neighbors with coffee cups and subtle grins. One woman whispered, "Did you hear? She buried electric lines without permits, next to a gas main." And someone else added, "I guess she really did light up the neighborhood, almost literally." Karen stood in the center of her lawn, hair frizzing in the morning humidity, surrounded by violation flags and yellow tape. And that's when the HOA board president arrived, clipboard in hand. "Face grim, Karen," he said. "We're suspending your voting privileges immediately, and pending the outcome of this city review, we'll be moving to remove you permanently from the HOA board." Karen's breath hitched. "You're voting me out." "You voted yourself out," he replied. "With every signature you forged, every citation you faked, every stunt you pulled." The flags on her lawn flapped like warning signs in the wind. But Preston knew it wasn't over yet, because in his back pocket was one last document he hadn't even needed to use yet. The original deed layout showing the exact border of Karen's property line, and where she built her precious HOA welcome arch. It was 5 feet into Preston's land. Karen hadn't just trespassed, she'd constructed a permanent structure on someone else's private property. And next time she heard from him, it wouldn't be through HOA channels, that it would be through a civil attorney. Karen had always said her welcome arch was the crown jewel of Willow Creek Estates. Hand-painted lettering, solar lanterns, a ribbon that changed with the seasons. She called it the first impression our neighborhood deserves. Preston called it what it really was. Trespass with flair. She built it 3 years ago without approval, claimed the HOA had unanimously backed it, though no one could ever produce the minutes from that mythical vote. Most neighbors assumed she had permission, or maybe they just didn't want to pick that fight. But Preston had known from day one something was off, and now, with Karen buried under investigations, citations, and the threat of criminal review, the timing was perfect. He walked into the county assessor's office with a quiet smile and a single manila envelope. Inside, the original property line deed from the developer, signed, sealed, and still sharp enough to cut through the noise. It showed clearly, in ink and grid lines, that Karen's welcome arch wasn't unshared HOA space. It was 5 feet onto Preston's personal lot that made it an unauthorized structure on private residential property, which meant Preston had every legal right to file for its removal or sue for damages. And that's exactly what he intended to do. He didn't go nuclear though, not yet. Instead, he hand-delivered a formal letter to Karen's mailbox, witnessed and time-stamped, outlining 3 options. Remove the arch within 10 days, no questions asked. Negotiate a land use agreement, unlikely. Ignore it, and face civil litigation. By noon, Karen was outside in gardening gloves, yanking weeds furiously near the arch like that might make it blend in. She spotted Preston watching, and marched across the lawn with that familiar half-smile, half-snarl. This is petty, she said, waving the letter. You're weaponizing property lines now. No, Preston replied. You did that when you built a monument to your ego 5 feet into my land, Karen huffed. We both know that arch benefits the whole community. Then build it on your side of the street, he said. She didn't respond, just stood there, nostrils flaring. And by the way, Preston added, the county marked the electrical trench for removal tomorrow. You'll want to be clear of the property when they dig. Karen spun on her heel and stomped back across the street, muttering, unbelievable. This is harassment. But the word she should have been thinking, lawsuit. Because 2 days later, Preston filed a formal civil claim in small claims court. Damages were modest, just enough to sting. Removal costs, legal fees, compensation for loss of private land, usage, but the real damage wasn't financial, it was reputational. The notice went public. It landed on the HOA community board, and in every neighbor's inbox. Mr. Preston Walker versus Karen Delacroix, unauthorized structure on private property. The same people who once applauded Karen's block parties were now talking in driveways, whispering in hushed tones. Someone even hung a sticky note on the arch. Wrong place, wrong decade, wrong woman. Karen's social life, gone. Her standing in the HOA, erased. Her driveway, once lit like a festival, was now dim and empty. But the most surreal moment came when she tried to file a counter-citation against Preston for emotional distress. The HOA president rejected it on the spot. You can't fine someone for enforcing fire code, Karen, he said. That's not how the law works. Her voice cracked. But he's humiliating me. He's destroying everything I built. The president raised an eyebrow. You destroyed it, Karen. He just lit the match you left soaking in gasoline. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, a local HOA watchdog podcast reached out to Preston for an interview. He declined. For now, because for him, this wasn't about clout. It was about principle. He'd spent his career protecting neighborhoods from disaster, and this time, the fire hazard wasn't a forest. It was a woman who thought rules only applied to other people, and he wasn't done. Yet, Thursday morning came like a slow-rolling thunderstorm. Quiet, but loaded. Preston stood on his porch again, coffee steaming in his hand, watching as 2 unmarked county vehicles rolled to a soft stop in front of Karen's house. Not fire marshal. Trucks this time, something higher. Office of State Code, Compliance, Division, Structural and Environmental Safety. This wasn't HOA territory anymore. This was state-level enforcement. Karen must have seen them too. Curtains fluttered. A flash of robe. And then silence. 2 inspectors got out, clipboards in hand, steel-toed boots. As surgeons. They didn't knock. They went straight around the side of the house. Preston sipped slow. He knew what they were after. Because last week, while prepping his lawsuit about the arch, he found something else in the city permit database. A flagged complaint, old, never resolved. Unauthorized grading and drainage. Modifications. Karen Delacroix, backyard. She'd tried to cover it up years ago. Refilled the forms, replanted some shrubs, claimed the issue was handled internally. But now that she was under review for electrical code violations and permit fraud, everything was fair game. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Neighbors began gathering again. Subtle but curious watering plants that didn't need it. Walking dogs that weren't pulling. Everyone knew something was happening. You could feel it. Finally, the inspectors re-emerged, and they were not smiling. Waved toward the sidewalk. A third man joined them, a state compliance officer Preston recognized. Ken Halderman, dead serious. Known for shutting down entire developments over wetlands violations. That's when the whispers started, because Karen hadn't just built an illegal lighting trench. She had rerouted her backyard drainage system. Illegally. The inspectors discovered that years ago. Karen had a French drain installed to stop her yard from flooding in heavy rain. But instead of draining to the street like it was supposed to, it diverted runoff water under her neighbors' yards, cutting through public utility lines and flowing directly toward a protected slope zone behind the coal-stay-sack. Worse. There was mold buildup under one neighbor's foundation, a married couple in their 70s, veterans. They'd just thought it was the age of the house. And Karen, she never told a soul what she'd done. Until now. By the afternoon, Halderman delivered the news publicly right at her door, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. Ma'am, you're being served with a cease and desist on all unpermitted structures and utilities. You're also under environmental code review for illegal water diversion. We're opening a case file. Karen's face dropped. Wait, what, for a drain? That's not even come on. It's underground. That's the problem, he said, and if we find out you contracted unlicensed work, we'll be referring this to the district attorney's office. The words hit like a punch. District attorney. Karen blinked, stammered, backed into her doorframe like it could swallow. Her whole this is absurd. I'm not a criminal. I'm a volunteer. Halderman didn't flinch. Volunteers don't get to rewrite safety codes. She tried to pivot to Preston, pointing across the street again, voice shrill. He's doing this to me. He's making this personal. But Preston didn't even move. He just held up his coffee mug, the same one he used on fire inspections, and gave her the smallest, slowest nod. I'm just following procedure, he said. You taught us all how important that was. Remember. Karen slammed the door without a word, and the inspectors started flagging areas around her yard, this time with bright pink tape. State-level investigation indicators. You don't get those unless they expect to dig and document. By nightfall, Karen's house looked less like the home of the HOA queen, and more like a construction site under federal lockdown. The red carpet, long gone. The golden arch, removed with a crane. The only spotlight she had now came from a state-led floodlight aimed directly at her backyard trench. But it still wasn't the end, because Preston received a voicemail that night from the county's civil claims office. Karen had just filed an emergency motion to block his lawsuit, claiming emotional and social harassment. The judge rejected it in under 3 hours, and Preston, he'd just retained a property rights attorney, because, while Karen was panicking, he was preparing to take everything she built and legally own it. It was a warm Friday morning when Karen Delacroix walked into the county courthouse in heels that clicked too loud and sunglasses too big for anyone to miss her. But for once, no one was looking, not because they didn't recognize her, because everyone already knew how it was going to end. The courtroom was packed. Preston sat near the front, a clean folder on his lap and his property rights attorney beside him. Behind them, a handful of neighbors filled the gallery, quiet, respectful, but clearly there for one thing: justice. Judge McMillan was known for being sharp, no nonsense, and allergic to HOA theatrics. He adjusted his glasses, flipped through the file on his bench, and sighed. Ms. Delacroix, he said. You are the defendant in this civil matter regarding unauthorized construction on Mr. Walker's private property. Do you have anything else to submit before we proceed? Karen stood, posture rigid, hands trembling just enough to notice. Your Honor, I'd like to reiterate that this structure, the arch, was built for the benefit of the entire community. McMillan didn't even look up. You built it on someone else's land, without permission. The deed is clear, the survey is accurate, and the footage is time-stamped. This isn't about community benefit. This is about property rights. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And, he added, your countersuit for emotional distress has been formally dismissed. Again, her attorney gave her a light tap on the arm. Sit down. Preston stood when called. Calm, factual, no theatrics. He read a short statement. I've served in fire inspection and emergency enforcement for over 15 years. I follow codes for a living. When someone like Ms. Delacroix disregards safety, misuses her HOA position, and takes over someone else's land without consent, that's not just wrong, that's dangerous. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mr. Walker. It took less than 20 minutes. When the gavel dropped, the ruling was simple. The structure was to be permanently removed at Karen's expense. She was ordered to pay $6,700 in damages and legal fees. A formal no trespass order was issued, preventing her from stepping foot on Preston's property. And the big one. She was barred from serving on any HOA board. In the county for 5 years, the courtroom was silent for a beat. Then a quiet yes came from the back. It was Mrs. Bennett, the elderly woman whose foundation had been damaged by illegal drainage. Outside, the local HOA Watchdog podcast crew tried to catch Karen for comment. She shoved past them, sunglasses down, jaw clenched, walking like the sidewalk had betrayed her. But Preston didn't follow her. He stood on the steps, with a quiet sense of finality. He didn't need to chase headlines. He had done what she never could: respect the rules. That weekend, something incredible happened. The HOA held a special election to replace the vacated vice president position, the very seat Karen had once used like a throne. Preston didn't run, but the neighborhood wrote him in anyway. He won by 78% of the vote. His first order of business: revising the bylaws to require mandatory third-party review of all board-approved events and structures. Second, installing fire code signage and hydrant clearance enforcement across the entire neighborhood. Paid for by a special fund repurposed from Karen's arch project, neighbors showed up for the reveal ceremony. Preston spoke for 2 minutes, just enough to thank the community for standing up. No ego, no speeches, no spotlight. And then he stepped back and let the real star take center stage. A brand new sign near the entrance of the neighborhood, simple, professional. It read, safety first, respect always. Willow Creek enforces fire code compliance. And underneath, a tiny engraved line that made the crowd laugh out loud: red carpets belong in theaters. Karen, now a ghost in her own cul-de-sac, kept her curtains closed for weeks. The lights never came back on. The flags in her yard were gone. Her last remaining HOA royalty sash was seen at a garage sale, priced at $1. Preste. He went back to work. Back to real emergencies. Back to a life where rules weren't optional, and responsibility didn't come with ribbons. But every time he pulled onto his driveway, clear, unblocked, no red carpet in sight, he smiled. Because he hadn't just defended his property, he'd set a precedent. And Karen, she'll never forget the man who rolled in with the badge. She'll never saw coming.